What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 78, and I am the host, Kyle Anzalone. On today's show, I am interviewing Matteo Marchionni. He is an international relations student at Suffolk University. He is the host of the Neutral Parisian Report on YouTube, NP Report on Twitter, and today we're talking about Khashoggi, the ICC investigating Israel, and Erik Prince smuggling weapons into Libya. Matteo was last on the show on episode 63, so you could be sure to go back and check out that episode. On today's show, I did make a slight audio recording mistake, and so me and Matteo had to go back and record just a little bit of the show, so if it sounds choppy at all, my apologies on that, but I think we got all the great content and information out there that we needed to, so I hope you all enjoyed the interview. Before I get to the interview, I just want to remind people to share the show. Specifically, check out the Facebook page. It's really taking off right now. We got a lot of great momentum up there. Like the post engagement are up well over 10,000%. Likes are up 4,000 or 5,000%. So guys, keep it up. Keep sharing. Keep liking the show. Me and Will are putting out tons of short clips of us talking from previous episodes that are getting a lot of shares. So I really appreciate everybody who's taken the time to put that out there. I'll also mention the Libertarian Institute is holding their annual fundraiser, well over halfway to our goal right now. Right now we have matching funds, so if you donate, the number is doubled. So think about getting yourself some great kit bags, digital books, signed books, Ron Paul copper coins, libertarianinstitute.org/donate, and then I think the sponsor of the show, Paloma Verde, PalomaVerdeStore.com, is a great small business that sells high quality CBD products, lab tested products, so you know what you're getting. They sell salt gels, gummies, extracts, slobs. I really like the slob stick that they sent me this last time. Just put a little bit of it on my back when I'm feeling pain, and within like 10-20 minutes, that inflammation that you feel, like a little burning pain in your back, pretty much subsides and goes away. So really recommend the products that they have over there at PalomaVerdeStore.com. Just be sure to use the promo code PEACE at checkout so they know you came from the show, and you'll get yourself a discount. Again, PalomaVerdeStore.com, promo code PEACE. Thanks everybody for supporting everything that we're doing here at the show, and let's get into the interview. Hey, Matteo, welcome back to the show. Today we're talking first about this report on Jamal Khashoggi, his killing, and Saudi Crown Prince de facto ruler Mohammed bin Salman. You have a great video out on your channel on Mohammed bin Salman and his possible responsibility for the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. So let's get into this, I guess, very quick summary of a declassified report.
Yeah, so basically, for people who don't know, basically, Khashoggi was a Saudi Arabian, Saudi journalist who actually had citizen in the United States too, and he was often very critical of the regime there in Saudi Arabia, and he was murdered in 2017 in the Turkish embassy in the Saudi Arabian embassy in Turkey, and everybody kind of knew that he was probably, killed and by orders of the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia. Just for the simple fact that an act like that wouldn't really be possible without his orders. Who else would carry that out? And so now we have this declassified document, which is only a part of it, surely, because it's only 4 pages, and it has some information that finally, gives us proof that this, what we suspected was the case is in fact what happened. And Khashoggi was then cut into pieces, although we don't have the information in this part of the declassified documents. I'm guessing that's what the full report would also include. But yeah, these 4 pages basically only show us, give us proof, but basically how the Crown Prince was most likely basically involved in ordering actually his killing. And there was people, I think there was 15 people involved in total. 7 of them were from the RIF, which is the Royal Intervention Force. and some also from the Saudi Center for Studies in Media Affairs. And yeah, that's they were declassified also by the Director of National Intelligence, and it's interesting to see how this is going to change the relations, maybe going forward with the United States in particular, of course. And we already know that Biden has halted some sales of weapons to Saudi Arabia for their fight against the Houthis in the Yemen civil war. And yeah, I think we'll see if things change from now onwards.
Yeah. So one part, just for people who aren't watching the video, there are some redactions within this assessment. It's kind of like the torture report executive summary, where even within this very small portion of the document that's been declassified, they are redacting things, including looking like redacting the first word of the report. So I'm wondering what that would be, if it's like another intelligence agency or something like that. And then getting into it, and I think you bring up the important part of talking about this, because for the most part, people have known that Jamal Khashoggi was killed in the Turkish consulate or the Saudi consulate in Turkey in 2017. I don't think there's really been a whole lot of even attempt to dispute that. But at the same time, a couple things about this always seemed a little bit suspicious to me. It seemed a little bit of an amateur job. The people arrive from Saudi Arabia, they're captured on film. Turkey has listening equipment within the consulate. Apparently, they didn't look for that. And then one of the things to me that was like most suspicious was they had some guy who, I mean, matched the dimensions of Jamal Khashoggi. They probably wear like the same size clothes, put on his clothes, and then leave the consulate. But Khashoggi's fiance was outside, and so she would recognize it if he walked out. And so there just seemed to be so many parts here where maybe it wasn't this way, maybe there was something else happening, just because it seemed very poorly executed. But no, it was just a really poorly executed hit ordered by a head of state.
Yeah, exactly. And I think maybe I made a mistake earlier. I said this happened in 2017. It was actually 2018. But yeah, I think, I'm glad that we have this information, right? It gives us a bit of information. But as you said, there's redacted parts still, and we don't have the full document, which obviously, makes you still wonder why that's the case. Surely that means there's more things that we're not supposed to know about. They don't want us to know about, right? And so we don't have the full picture here, that's for sure. And yeah, as you can see, there's also the list of all the people who were involved, the 15 people, which I also think is pretty interesting. So you can like make the connections to the Crown Prince. But yeah, as you said, it was a poorly executed, operation, and it just looks really bad on them.
Right. So I guess one of the important things that could come from this report, because you can't bring Jamal Khashoggi back, and it doesn't seem like Biden is going to particularly punish Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Doesn't look like he's going to get sanctioned over this. But one of the things that could come from this report then would be exposing the cruelty of the Saudi regime, in hopes that it could help us to bring more of a conclusion to the war in Yemen. Certainly, at this point, maybe even the U.S. completely not helping Saudi Arabia isn't enough to end the war. Whatever, there still may be some fighting, and Yemen's gonna be a complicated country for decades to come because of the devastation that's been inflicted on that society. All the different power sharing agreements, I'm sure, are gonna be a total mess in the years to come. But at the same time, if the leader of Saudi Arabia is running around executing journalists who work for American outlets, like that's one of the things. This is run. The Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, one of the most powerful men in the world. I mean, how many people wake up every day, read the Washington Post, and get all their stuff from Amazon? And so having Bezos involved here is I don't know, just an interesting part to all of this too, I guess. And turning people against the war in Yemen, I think, is one of the most important things. Certainly, a lot of the momentum in the U.S. to stop weapons sales to Saudi Arabia over the war in Yemen, 2018, 2019, really picked up after the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, because this was so brutal. I think Lindsey Graham even said that he felt like Mohammed bin Salman made him personally look stupid because he had said that this is a good guy, nice young man, reformer, and then he goes and kills and dismembers a journalist in a foreign consulate. So, yeah, I don't know. So, from the U.S. side, I'm not sure how much more of a difference this will make, since Biden doesn't look to be extending anything. And again, he's already cut off offensive weapons in Yemen, but it doesn't seem like he's really interested in the war. So, in the U.K., is this having any impact? Because the U.K. is one of the few countries that is not agreed to cut off offensive weapons to Saudi Arabia, even if that is an empty token gesture.
Yeah, no, in the UK, I wouldn't say it's definitely been talked about quite a bit. I think the whole Jamal Khashoggi incident from when it happened, it's been in the mainstream. But I don't think necessarily it's going to change anything. There's obviously, a protest, for example, locally here. I've been to protests myself to cover them, and basically of arm manufacturers who basically produce just parts of components of like weapons or systems that go in aircraft, which then are shipped, assembled somewhere, and then sent to Saudi Arabia. So there is for sure a movement against that, and there has been protests in the past, but I wouldn't say enough to, warrant the government actually changing their relationship for the time being.
Right, I feel a lot of the same way about the U.S. The protesting on weapons manufacturers seems like an interesting idea and something I haven't seen in the U.S. I feel like I remember it from the Iraq War under Bush, but not since. And the people in the U.S. apparently don't make that good money, like $35,000 a year for an assembly line worker at Raytheon. And so, if you could protest and get these people to realize, hey, you're not making very good money, and you're making a lot of money for a bunch of executives who just want to go kill poor innocent kids overseas, maybe they would do less of it, or quit, look for different jobs, stuff like that. Maybe it's a possibility. I know that there was some success in not Israel, Italy, around this, where there was like a protest at a manufacturing plant. They actually stopped, I believe, a weapons shipment, or they stopped some weapons from being loaded on a ship at one point too. And so these kind of things could be effective in helping to save some poor innocent kids from U.S. or U.K. bombs.
Yeah, you're right. It was a few years ago now in Sardinia. There was an arms shipment which was stopped in Italy, and it was actually quite an interesting story from a couple of weeks ago. And I'll just give a bit of context. As Italy's gone through yet another government change, and that was caused by this guy called Renzi, who was part of the old government, and then he withdrew his consent basically, and that left the government without a majority. It fell, and they had to put a new one. And during that time, while that all of that was happening, he also traveled to Saudi Arabia and actually met with Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, and it was pretty ridiculous because he was basically saying, I'm sure he gets paid to go there. It's like a conference, and he was saying how Saudi Arabia could be the next Renaissance. Renzi's from Tuscany, so that's where original Renaissance was, and so. With all the human rights abuses that Saudi Arabia carries out, that's just ridiculous. And it was, that was covered in Italy, and so at least, but it's really hard to, argue much in favor of Saudi Arabia in especially when it comes to alliances between countries and support for their regime and the war they carried out.
Right. Anything else I'm missing on the Khashoggi report, Matteo? I will link to your video on it in the show notes page for anybody who wants to check out your. Your videos are usually like 7 to 10 minutes, nice, short, but do a pretty thorough covering of one subject. So, anything else from that we should touch on?
No, I think we've covered all the important points there.
All right. Never very hopeful about international courts. I'm libertarian, but there does seem to be something to the ICC picking up this trial against Israel, if only because of how much Israel is complaining about it, that it's drawn my attention. And so, what's going on with this? Any hope that this helps the Palestinian cause at all? Again, I'm not, international law isn't my favorite thing, but the Palestinians are being deprived of COVID vaccinations. The kids can't go to school. Gaza's pretty much unlivable. Anything to help the living situation of these people is important. So, fill us in.
Again, it's I think it's a good sign, because it means that an investigation is gonna be carried out, and that's obviously good news. But I was actually looking more into it, and it seems like from the Oslo Accords of 1993, there's an agreement. So that's, an agreement between Palestine and Israel, where basically Israel has jurisdiction over the territories that they've occupied, the occupied lands, which I just talked about, Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. And so what that means is that Israelis cannot be persecuted in those territories because they're the ultimate. They have jurisdiction and they're the ones who can persecute anyone. And so basically, I don't think that any war crimes can be held accountable against Israelis in those territories because, in fact, they're not going to convict themselves, right? And there's never been any, at least not I've never heard of any, Israelis being convicted there, and so for war crimes and stuff to do with the conflict. So, unfortunately, I don't think this investigation is going to go too far, basically.
Right. Yeah, that was my concern is that it wouldn't go too far, but it maybe in like the court of public perception, is there any chance that if like an investigation starts to uncover some information is put out by the ICC, could that help to expose maybe how bad the situation is in Gaza, and maybe if the ICC says it, more people will listen to it than if whatever Palestinian advocacy group says it, or something like that. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. I think the investigation is supposed to go forward, and therefore, that should bring out all the information that is necessary of what has been going on there. This was, as I said, for 2014, I believe, and so it will definitely, hopefully, bring to light some things that have been committed, some war crimes, and that would be not, then in the public. And then if the ICC can then not prosecute Israel for it, then we'll see about that. But at least we'll have more information as to what happened there and how Israel actually portrays itself in the conflict.
Right. Yeah. So Netanyahu's not going to jail on this. Doesn't seem like that could be a possibility, but again, court of public perception kind of thing. It could be a real victory for, the Palestinians here. It does seem like there's a lot of Palestinian groups interested in going this route and thinks it could be helpful that way. So I definitely want to keep an eye on this and talk about what kind of information the ICC is putting out, just because, again, I think the source there is kind of like if it comes from the New York Times or the Washington Post, people take a little bit more attention to it than if it comes from Mondo Weiss or the Electric Intifada. And my guess is that the New York Times and the Washington Post will cover this more because it is coming from the ICC. And so hopefully we could, make some improvements for the Palestinians with all of this. Now, I did notice a big kind of threat that the Israelis were putting up here was that this was anti-Semitic, and that the ICC was formed in response to the Holocaust and the war crimes committed by the Nazis, and how terrible it is that Israel is now being looked at by the ICC, and it's a travesty of justice. It seems like a real smokescreen that they're putting up, and trying to divert attention and get wriggle out of having an investigation here. But at the same time, there's a lot of people who hear that, and I mean, World War II is like the most significant event, for a lot of people in world history. And so tying it to World War II and the Holocaust, they just say, oh yeah, that's terrible. That's anti-Semitic.
Right, yeah, and Netanyahu actually came out with a speech after that. The green light for going forward with this investigation was published, and it's just a short video, and he just basically talks about that, how it's all of the investigation is an act of anti-Semitism, and how the war crimes are basically fake. And I know I would say, first of all, if the war crimes are fake, then you wouldn't have any problem, having an investigation conducted there. And second of all, Israel's like got this, I guess, particular card, which they, always seem to play when it comes to, the anti-Semitism card. And not that obviously, that was a terrible thing that happened in our history, but it's just utilized for anything, any kind of criticism that is portrayed on Israel, and that's just not, it's just doesn't have to do with anything to do with discrimination against Jewish people. It's just an honest investigation that is going to be carried out, and as it would be in any other country, and it should be. And so I think, yeah, that's, they always use that, and he always talks about in that statement about the ICC, he brings out even Iran and Syria, I think, and how the ICC should be investigating them because they're regimes and they commit war crimes. And he was just doing foreign policy yet again in another statement. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be investigated, but it was just not the place to do so. And yeah, but again, as I said, I don't think it's going to go that far. Let's remember that the UN itself doesn't recognize those territories as part of Israel. They're illegally occupied, right? And so that again goes to show how important international law actually is.
Right. Yeah, I talked about in the last show that the U.S. was rejoining the Human Rights Council, and the liberals in the U.S. are ecstatic. This is a return to normalcy. Biden cares about human rights. He cares about starving kids. And then when you look at the actual statement for why the U.S. joined the Human Rights Council, it's because they think that the Human Rights Council has a disproportionate attention that they pay to Israel, and so they want to direct that towards other places. So it's not that they want to end suffering. It's just that they want people to care about different suffering to protect their allies in Israel. Matteo, on your channel at YouTube, you had the video, "The ICC's investigation into Israel war crimes is useless." For people who want to go watch it, I will put the link in the show notes page. But is there anything else in that video that I didn't ask you about or that we should hit on before we move on?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I go into a bit more depth in the video, but we've covered all the important points.
All right, so the next story we have up here is a pretty interesting one. Trump ally Erik Prince violated Libya arms embargo. Erik Prince is a name that has come up a lot on the show. This guy is pretty much chief mercenary. He's worked with, as the leader of different mercenary companies and different groups. Most famously, Blackwater, of course. They're killed all those innocent people in Iraq, and then Trump pardoned them on his way out the door. Also, when we're talking about Erik Prince, it's important to note that his sister, Betsy de Vos, was in Trump's cabinet for essentially his whole term. She finally resigned, I think, in January of 2021 over some of the election stuff. But for the most part, yeah, his sister was in the cabinet. Trump had at least some access to Erik Prince throughout. He at one time was trying to get the U.S. to wage the entire Afghan war, like as him being the viceroy military contractor carrying the whole thing out. So, Matteo, what do you think about him smuggling weapons to Libya?
Yeah, it just, I couldn't expect anything else from Erik Prince. Like he just sees war as a way to profit, and that's it. That's the only motive that he sees war useful for, and that's always been the case. Now he's resigned, like he's left Blackwater, and they've since renamed it to Academy, and I think now he's got another company which is in China, I believe. It's called Frontier Services Group, and its main operations are in Africa. And I don't know if he's shifted towards Africa now in African conflicts, but he's had a lot of involvements, in African conflicts. Again, for the same purposes, private contracting, and I think the Libya one is an interesting one as well, because it's it just basically it was a it was under a violation of the UN. Was it called they had a treaty and an embargo, right? Since 2011, I believe, and then it was kind of changed to not supplying Haftar only. Although it's a very complex conflict, right? Because there's people in countries supplying both sides. But yeah, it's the United States should, technically should not be supplying Haftar, and because obviously part of the UN, and it was done under the guise of Trump, who knew all about this, and so it's yeah, there's about $80 million, I think, of weaponry and whatever is part of that Erik Prince was going to carry out in Libya. Although I don't think it was successful. It didn't actually turn out to be successful. But yeah, it's just goes to show once again how lots of these wars and lots of, especially the private contracting, as you said, in Afghanistan and what he was doing in Iraq is not there to advance any common interests, but it's just for profit.
Right. Now, one of the really horrible things about smuggling weapons into Libya is just how awful the country and what a failed state it's been since really, I guess, 2011 when Barack Obama killed Muammar Gaddafi, right? As it's been in pretty much chaos and a state of civil war since then. And so, this is a guy who's making money off of the blood of Libyans. He's selling additional weapons, they're killing more people. Also, I remember that some of this arms smuggling stuff, and maybe it wasn't particularly the arms smuggling by Erik Prince, but Turkey was smuggling arms, and this created some real tensions with France when France tried to intercept one of those ships, and this has caused far more international confrontation than just within Libya itself. As in Libya, you have Haftar, who's supported by France, the UAE, Russia, and then you have an opposition government that at least is mostly supported by Turkey. I've heard Italy is somewhat involved with the Western government, the Tripoli government in Libya, but I'm sure that Arab Prince pouring all these weapons in is also exacerbating all of those other tensions and increasing fighting all over and confrontation all over the place in the Mediterranean Sea, not just in Libya, by helping supply these weapons.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely it's Libya's a very complex situation since it was invaded back in 2011. Gaddafi was toppled, and as we know, there's slavery's come back to that country, and although Gaddafi wasn't a peacemaker, the country is definitely in a worse state now than it ever was under his rule, kind of the same as in Iraq, and so it's. It's terrible, and I think I really don't know what to add. I think Turkey, yeah, Turkey's actually also supplying, and as you said, and Italy as well to the other side, and everybody's got their own interests. Turkey's recently come in, and they have their own interests when it comes to spreading the influence, I think, to the broader Middle East and also to North Africa. But yeah, Russians involved as well. They have mercenaries as well with the Wagner group, and it's terrible because at the end of the day, all these conflicts, it's the people who suffer from it.
Right. And yeah, there is a weird thing there where Prince would be smuggling weapons for the Russia side of this conflict. And for all the people who have been accused of supporting Russia, over the past few years, Erik Prince isn't one of the people that got that criticism. And this isn't one of the things that Trump was criticized, for being too close to Russia on. And Haftar's a pretty brutal warlord. I'm not quite sure how he managed this, but the guy, I think, was wanted by the ICC, or at least his fighters are, and he was able to get medical treatment in France and then come back to Libya in the past couple of years. There's some very strange things when it comes to what's happening in Libya, especially since Sultan Erdogan thinks that he could apparently split the Mediterranean Sea with Libya if he is able to prop up that government in Tripoli for long enough. The map that they put out, where they essentially divide the Eastern Mediterranean Sea in half between Libya and Turkey is one of the oddest things I have ever seen. But they're really pushing forward with it, and my guess is that is a lot of what's fueling this conflict here. I don't think I have anything else on Libya other than it's a mess that the United States destroyed, and it's such a shame that U.S. Mercenaries are profiting off of the suffering and blood of more Libyans than they already have.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, I would say. I think it's just another one of those wars which has no end in sight yet. It's one of those countries that's been, it's in chaos, and it's a very complex situation. It kind of reminds you of Iraq a bit, and there's no, resolution in the near future that's gonna happen. So yeah.
Right. All right, so before we wrap here, I did want to ask you about this report that we have from the Gray Zone. Matt Blumenthal wrote up a big article, and on the last show, Will Porter did talk about it a little bit, but I think it's particularly interesting because you are in the UK, and it was the UK Foreign Office that was giving funds to Reuters, BBC, and Bellingcat to fund programs to quote unquote weaken Russia. So I don't know. Are people in the UK, do they care that the BBC and Reuters were taking money from the Foreign Office to, write reports that were negative about Russia?
No, I don't think many people even know about this. It's been reported on the Grey Zone, but you wouldn't really hear about it anywhere else, right? And it's just it's expected because you always have to, I think, look at where, especially when it comes to newspapers, where they're funded from to kind of understand what their writing may look like, and this is an interesting one. And I mean, all countries obviously have that, right? They have give funding for media and other things to promote their own interests. And the Bellingcat, for example, gets I think also from the NED, if that's possible, and so it just goes to show that they have funding from certain institutions, though they do claim to be carry out independent and unbiased research and investigative journalism. But there's always reason to be skeptical about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I read Reuters a lot, and I guess I felt like I'm pretty often skeptical about what I read there, and I kind of understand that they're putting out the message of the U.S. empire. They want you to hear what Washington wants you to hear, and so that's typically things about Russia are typically written in a bad light. But it seems another step to actually be taking money directly from like the UK government or from the US government to do it. Then you're just right. It turns it from even just being favorable towards the US to essentially writing propaganda for the US. And it doesn't seem like there's a real reckoning there. Now, you did mention that now a whole lot of people probably had read or saw the article, but I think one of the things actually kind of blew up in Twitter's face, and a lot more people have seen the article because of it, was they put a pretty controversial warning label on the tweet saying that it had hacked material. It's like this little circle with an exclamation point. These materials may have been attained through hacking. So I know you're very interested in like the media side stuff. So what do you think about this label?
Yeah, actually, it's a good point there because then people actually started just memeing the basically putting memes and just linking the Max Blumenthal's article, and so it would just show up as these materials have been obtained through hacking, and so it became kind of a joke and spread across the internet or at least Twitter that way. And yeah, it's the first time I think this label was actually created for this particular case because I've never seen it before, and yeah, it's an interesting one. I think it's it shows how Twitter is able to obviously decide how things run on their platform, of course. And there's cool. I mean, I guess it can be helpful to some extent because, but then you have to always look at into the how that label is then utilized because does it apply to all hacked materials? Do they have they only utilize it for some things? And the whole fake news labeling, I think that's probably worse because it's more politicized rather than hacking, which it can be, I guess, but it's if anything, I think maybe a label that shows that it's hacked material draws more attention to it rather than, I don't know what the purposes of it were, rather than other than, maybe trying to inform people. But yeah, I don't think it's necessarily bad in itself. Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of the things that me and Will talked about. And my point to Will was that I thought it was okay that it happened to the gray zone. I think if me or you had put out a video with our limited reach, following, and name recognition, it could have like just killed anybody from wanting to click on or share the video. I know that like I would be skeptical about sharing something like that just because I feel like it would like nail me in the Twitter algorithms or something like that. They're like, oh, you're sharing hacked content, so now we're going to put your content out to less people. Also, as you said, it became like a meme within itself. And I think a part of that is because the gray zone has a large enough following that there's, followers who'll figure out like the interesting things you do at Twitter. So they found out if you like put an image on there and the link, they'll still come up with the warning, but it looks like the warning's for the image, not for the link. And so like it's kind of funny, but unless you have the following to generate that kind of thing, I think it's kind of difficult to do. And then also on top of that, this is written by Max Blumenthal, who is the son of Sidney Blumenthal, a Hillary Clinton advisor. And so you can't claim he's a Russian. I mean, his dad works for Hillary Clinton. So I think all that kind of goes into when it happens to the gray zone. I do think it has that effect, and hopefully now, because there's been so much attention paid to it with the gray zone article, and it's kind of a joke, that if they try to do it to somebody else, it would be seen as kind of a joke. But if it was a new thing just slapped on some outlet without the reach and reputation, I think it would hurt that outlet a little bit more. And when I talked to Will about on the last show, he pointed out that there was one other time it was used, and it was on a Italian article about a vaccine thing. I don't
Right.
know anything about that article at all, or really care about, but apparently it was used once before.
I see. No, yeah, as I said, I thought this was the first time, so I'd never read that either.
All right, Matteo, anything else on this, or let people know where to find your work and all the great stuff you're doing?
Yeah, I think that we've covered everything. Thank you for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure and very interesting. For people interested in my work, you can find me at on Twitter at NP Report and on YouTube at the Neutral Partisan Report. And I also have a website which is neutralpartisan.com, and that's where I have also a couple of articles listed which I've written, and more information there basically. So yeah, thanks for having me, Kyle.
All right, links are in the show notes page. That way you can find Mateo's work. But Neutral Partisan on YouTube, make sure you go there, hit the subscribe button, and check out all the videos. You drop a couple a week, right?
Yes, a couple of weeks. I try to with all the work I have at the moment, but yeah,
Right. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming back on the show, Mateo. It was a pleasure talking with you.
me too. Thank you.